So welcome to this class on the Yoga Sutras. In the previous week, we've been covering the beginning of chapter 1, and we're discussing the first definitions of nirodha, the stopping back internally process of how I stop back patterns from the past, really, or distortions in my field of awareness that prevent me from feeling in absorption or in a state of bliss. So what is it that's happening in my mind where I'm stuck in some survival patterns? And previously we learned that there's a recipe, yogash chitta vritti nirodha, which means that yoga, union, is equated to nirodha, the stopping back internally. And that second Yoga Sutra, which I'm spinning back to rather quickly, sorry for your eyes, is one of the more famous Yoga Sutras. Union, being in the moment, in bliss, connected to all it is, comes from stopping back internally the spinnings in my field of awareness, or the previous existences. We went through then naming what those vrittis are, that some of them are afflicting, some of them non-afflicting. We fast forward to the 12th sutra, where we learn a prescription for nirodha, how to stop back. Abhyasa, vairagya. These are the two wings. Abhyasa means a practice, and vairagya means the state of non-preference, or not being colored from the past, not having a preference, or non-attachment. And because of these two things, abhyam, there is the stopping back of those chitta vrittis, of those spinnings, of those previous existences. Then we defined the practice, we defined what is non-attachment or non-preference. And now we're defining some modes of nirodha. We're describing nirodha. And we went through some of these earlier, talking about how for most of us it's a fully internally cognized process. I start with some technique, something with thought, vitarka. It then leads to an investigation, vichara, which then leads to a sense of bliss, ananda, which then leads to a sense of asmata, a sense of I-ness. These are forms or stages, you might say, in this internal process of becoming aware that I'm no longer stuck in the chitta vrittis and no longer disassociated or dissociated from the present moment. And the 18th sutra merely states that the one leads to the next, or has the residue of the previous one. So vichara, the investigation, has the residue of vitarka. So at the end of vitarka, some process with thought, at the end of that residue is what leads to vichara. In the investigation, the residue of that leads to ananda. So there's some sequential progression happening. The 19th sutra is where we are today, and Melissa and I will practice, so you can repeat after me. And we're down here in the black and the orange, which is where we break the words apart before they undergo sandhi, which means blending or joint. So you can respond to me, Melissa. Bhava.
Bhava.
Pratyaya.
Pratyaya.
Videha.
Videha.
Prakriti.
Prakriti.
Layanam.
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 So this is short, long. Layanam.
Layanam.
There we go. And this sutra is where people who don't believe in reincarnation or don't believe in the path of the soul, it kind of gets tricky to be teaching yoga, because This sutra doesn't specify multiple births like some of the later Yoga Sutras do. However, it does mention beings who are absorbed in Prakriti. And it implies that they have a choice to not come. So this is often a difficult sutra for teachers to present to a largely Western Judeo-Christian audience, implying that actually the soul has some choice in the matter as to whether to take a body or not. What yoga implies is that we take a body in order to burn the seeds of previous past actions. That it's here in a body that I actually can evolve. It's here in a human form specifically where I can make choice. Whereas in animal forms, I am very limited in my choice. So in a human form, I can make choice. And what's implied here is that actually a soul has a choice to not take a body. And what is a literal definition is that in the case of those who are out of body or absorbed in the unmanifest primary nature, which is a kind of a name for Prakriti. Prakriti is the original primary substance, or God, the feminine nature. The stopping back to be brought to stillness is actually unbecoming. So there needs to be a choice not to become. This is a fairly esoteric concept.
Mm-hmm.
The next sutra clears it up for the rest of us. And that word itara is the meaning of other, meaning the rest of us, because we all took bodies. So you can respond to me, Melissa. Shraddha,
Shraddha,
Virya,
Virya,
Smriti,
Smriti,
Samadhi,
Samadhi,
Prajna,
Pragya,
Purvakaha,
Purvakaha,
Itaresham.
Itaresham,
That's a long ah. Itaresham.
Itaresham.
Very nice. What this says is that for others, meaning the rest of us, the process of nirodha is purvakaha. One precedes the other, and that journey starts with faith. And this is an important concept that I teach frequently, and that I teach largely to Westerners, although I have a fair number of first or second generation Indian or international students here in America. And largely they do not come from a faith background. There is no religion. They're rational atheists, agnostics. They believe in science and in kindness. Their religion is kindness and right action. But there's nothing particularly wrong with that. However, there are a couple things that are often missing. One of them is faith. And so faith is not a rational process. It implies turning over my survival instincts to a higher power and having a sense of devotion and reverence toward that higher power. And here, in the 20th Yoga Sutra, it's implied that for those of us that embodied, faith is actually the beginning of the journey. And that it's from faith that I actually develop virya, the courage, strength, and power to take action. I also frequently talk about this and try to do my best to stay out of politics, but the fact is that a lot of people that practice a very ethnocentric form of religion do feel a strong sense of courage, strength, and power. because of their religion. And so they're often very well organized. They're even willing to die for their religion or their belief system. And that's a tremendous amount of courage, strength, and power, which is really beyond a personal, individual, human sense of courage. So it's from faith, actually, that we develop this. Now, certainly people develop that same level of courage, strength, and power through faith that's born from something beyond religion. I'm just sharing my own personal experience of being here on the planet in this era. This courage, strength, or power leads to smriti. Smriti means memory or mindfulness. And this is about being awake and aware. So faith then gives me courage, strength, or power to act. And then I have this awakening or mindfulness that starts to happen. A memory of something more than just this material world. And eventually, I reach states of Samadhi, full and total placement or absorption. I'm no longer editing my own behavior. I am absorbed in a process that I love. And right now, this is actually happening for me with Melissa and studying the Yoga Sutras. There are a lot of other things my mind could wander to, but I love studying the Yoga Sutras, even in my limited knowledge base and capacity. And I'm perfectly content just sharing time with Melissa. This absorption can then lead to prajna. And prajna is this primary insight, like God is directly talking to me. And this is what happens when people suddenly start to be able to immediately free-form with each other, whether it's musicians or athletes, because they've fallen into a state of absorption with each other. This divine primary insight starts to occur between the people. But this also happens for an individual, just in one individual's own process. And my experience of being around teachers is that I am really attracted to teachers who demonstrate the capacity to easily pass through these 5 different stages that are described in this Yoga Sutra. Because their faith is so strong, they have incredible sense of power. It's like palpable. And there's this incredible sense of mindfulness or depth memory to them. And it's so easy to fall into the moment around them. And then there's this incredible decoding of the mysteries of life that seems to happen inside of me just from being around them. Certainly I have had this experience around the monastics of Self-Realization Fellowship. I've also heard it just listening to the speech of great speakers, certainly listening to my own teacher Yogananda, certainly the presence of Dr. Vasanta Lad, just being in his presence. But I also choose to mention that I've felt this happen even in the presence of young children or babies or the birth or death of any creature. There's a power that happens when life is entering and exiting a body that tends to instill a sense of faith, develop a sense of deeper strength power. A sense of mindfulness takes over, an absorption in the moment, and then some special direct insight. Any questions you have, Melissa? This is an important Yoga Sutra. I teach this one frequently to students. I think it's one that has a lot of validity in our modern American society, where we've seemingly become so polarized. And there are a vast number of people who would like to continue to have faith, but are struggling with the trappings or the limitations of their ethnocentric religion, or the just the limitations of their own practice. There are also a lot of people that didn't have any faith background who would like to have one and don't have access for how to develop one. What I usually recommend is that people find a temple or a church in their neighborhood that's good enough. It doesn't need to be perfect. But ultimately, faith is about trusting in something beyond the material world. So every institution run by humans is going to have problems. I'm not going to a church or a temple to expect all of the people there to be perfect. I'm going there because I, like all of the rest of them, am imperfect, and I'm going there to aim for something higher. And it's that process of aiming that's important.
Mm-hmm.
The next two sutras are pretty straightforward. You can respond to me, Melissa. Diva.
Tivra.
This means close your teeth. Samveganam.
Samveganam.
It's a long word with a lot of heavy, long syllables, so it's useful to take a breath first. Samveganam.
Samveganam.
Asannaha.
Asannaha.
Beautiful chanting, Melissa. I had a student from many years ago. I never know when students will invoke me in this modern era. Write me an email and ask, does this refer to asana? Meaning yoga posture. Because a lot of yoga in America is taught through these yoga asana studios. This does not refer to asana, which comes from the root as, to sit or to be. This comes from the root san, that has the prefix a. This means that it is gained or acquired from all directions, or totally. Sutra itself means that for those whose desire or intensity for emancipation is very strong or intense, then it is very near. It's drawn from all directions. What are we referring to? The ones who choose to be free, nirodha, to stop back the drama from the past. So for someone who has an intense desire for emancipation, a high degree or a really high speed, it is the nearness is close. Just means it's basically one nice way to describe this is like for the people who are really hungry to be free, it's going to come faster.
Mm-hmm.
And so frequently, Melissa, I won't skip over this sutra, instead I'll stay with it. A lot of what I do in yoga privates or Ayurvedic consultations is I'm listening to people's lives. Much like my guru, Dr. Lad Ayurveda, he enters the heart of the patient. He knows, as I know, that this being is in a body that is a corruptible form that's going to die. And that person is undergoing whatever karmic imprinting they are intended to go through in this lifetime. So one of the key things I'm eventually working with with students or with clients is, well, what are you aiming for? What's your goal here? Like, I understand your concerns, but what's your goal? And at some point, a lot of what we as Ayurveda doctors or yoga teachers can offer is emancipation. Why not aim for freedom? Why not aim for liberation from selfish, sense-depraved behavior in this very lifetime?
Mm-hmm.
So the trick is to how to frame that. So frequently, as last night, I had a client who is in her early 30s, very charismatic, very bright, and came from a background where her creativity wasn't celebrated. She does not have a religion that she practices. She feels fairly estranged from religious practices in general. In her youth, she's been drawn towards charismatic, creative people who were free thinkers, who designed their own sort of nature-based spiritual practices. She herself is drawn towards her body and the expression of her body and the sensations of her body, all of which brought her into yoga. And yet there's this chaos that's happening in her life due to relationships. And the relationships look a lot like other people misbehaving. And yet when I reflect to her, I'm like, what are you doing with all of your Shakti, your vital energy, going out and doing these performance art things and getting into these sexual relationships with people? What do you think that's going to lead to? Like, don't expect the mass of humanity out there to guide you to freedom. Like, it's about actually redirecting the sense organs and the motor organs, the indriya, the 5 sense organs and the 5 motor organs, reserving their energy and bringing it inward on a journey towards God. And every religion is trying to describe this. Some of them are more dogmatic and sort of shame and blame about things like sex energy or whatever. But the point is, every religion is trying to get people to do things like take a break from food, fast once in a while, take a break from work and money-making activity for a while, take a break from sexual activity as a person of hormonal years for a while. And all of this is for that journey inward. And eventually, for anyone who's bright and aware, why not aim for liberation itself? And that's what this sutra reminds me of. The next sutra just clarifies that there is a difference between a little, a medium, and a lot. So basically of, desire for emancipation. So you can respond to me. We have these words broken apart here in the black and the orange. You can respond, Melissa. Mridu.
Mridu.
Madhya.
Madhya.
Arimatrat.
Arimatrat.
Tataha.
Tataha.
Api.
Api.
Visheshaha.
Visheshaha.
Very nice pronunciation. So this has the position 2 and the position 3 breath sound, fricative or sibilant. Sibilant. Sorry, I can't remember which it is. But anyway, that sound are called sibilants in English grammar. They're definitely fricatives. You definitely are using friction to make them with your breath. They're called ushman in Sanskrit. You use your breath to heat. So we have position 2, she, and then position 3, sha. And then you have the echo, ah, which is like your breath leaving you on a cold day and you see the water droplets. Visheshaha. So the whole sutra contracts down to mridu madhya, Mridu madhyadimatrat tatopi visheshaha. We'll try it once together, Melissa. I'll say, then you say. Mridu madhyadimatrat.
Mridu madhyadimatrat.
Very nice. It's not easy. Mridu madhyadimatrat.
Mridu madhyadimatrat.
Tatopi visheshaha.
Atoti.
So you can read here in the red. Tatopi visheshaha.
Tatopi visheshasaha.
Tatopi visheshaha.
Tatopi visheshaha.
Very nice. Mridu madhyadimatrat tatopi visheshaha.
Mridu madhyadimatrat. Tatopi visheshaha.
So nice, Melissa. It's amazing to hear you practicing with so little reference. You didn't grow up learning any native Indian language. None of these words are particularly ones that you might know, except for perhaps mridu, the soft quality from Ayurveda. But it's wonderful to hear you landing on the sounds. So this just says that there's a distinction. Also, api, also there is a distinction. Visheshaha. This is an important word. So it's one of the words to learn from the Yoga Sutra. Visheshaha means a distinction or a difference. And that's really what we're assisting students to make. There's a distinction to be made. I mentioned a story just a few minutes ago about a younger woman around 30, who has a lot of creative energy. And so because of her past conditioning, she doesn't want to keep it stifled inside. She wants to explore it. She wants to use it. So she finds herself doing sensual type dancing in places where men are paying money to watch her. She finds herself teaching yoga in ways that are drawing people that see her as an entertainer, as a performer. And so the distinction that I attempted to offer her is, where does this lead you in this incarnation if you continue forward with this use of your creative energy? As opposed to, let's celebrate Shakti, creative energy in the feminine form. Let's celebrate it, and instead, let's direct it rather than out toward other human beings for performance or entertainment. What if I used it instead for personal exploration toward the divine? And that is what Swadhyaya implies. The luminous self-study that is one of the niyama. And that's why codes of conduct are so important to teach, and yet they're so difficult to teach. Who am I, a 46-year-old man, to tell this 30-year-old woman what she should do? I'm not trying to tell her what she should do. Instead, I'm just asking her, if you continue forward with this use of your creative energy in these arenas, where is it likely to bring you? Here's another alternative. How about you still have this vital, creative, feminine energy that has seemingly felt suppressed for you most of your life? And you find ways that you can explore it internally. And by the way, you can still do it in a group context, but how about if we be selective what kind of a group that is? And maybe it's ones that are similarly aiming for emancipation.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a tricky subject to explore. And as a man and as a male teacher, I often actually will direct these younger women to find older women role models who seem to have found their way. So one of the things that I recommended for her was that she begin exploring yoga teachers that have bhakti, devotion, that do kirtan, do devotional chanting, and to see how they do it not from a place of performing a song, but rather just starting a song and then exploring the very sounds of the song and exploring their own devotion, and just allowing other people to respond and seeing what kind of energy builds up in that group context. And also that she might explore Indian classically trained singers or musicians who from the very beginning are taught these practices not as a performance, but as a means towards samadhi, a means toward absorption.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads us into the last sutra we'll do today, which is the 23rd. You can respond, Melissa. Ishvara
Ishvara
pranidhanat
Pranidanat
va.
Va.
One of the euphonic blendings, or sandhi, that happens in Sanskrit is that you cannot end a click sound before va, because va is, it doesn't blend easily. So instead, the clicking sound at the teeth will change to its sounded version, which is da, da, da. So it becomes Ishvara Pranidhanadva. You can try it. Ishvara Pranidhanadva. And what this means is or. Va means or. So there's an option. Or rather than this whole sort of internal cognized process of Nirodha, which we described before, which has techniques and processes of investigation, or you can just fully align yourself with the Holy Spirit inside. This or other route is the route of bhakti yoga, of devotional yoga, of singing. Because later on we'll learn that Ishvara, which is a part of the true self, which is not afflicted or not harmed by anything I've ever done, nor anything that's ever happened to me. So there's some part of me that is still pure. Yogananda said over and over again, the saint is a sinner who never gave up. So it's someone who's refusing to give up and acknowledging that they're imperfect, but continuing to work on purifying themselves. And so Ishvara is that part that is still luminous, always pure. It has a sound, and that by chanting that sound, I realize its meaning, and that sound is Om, holy vibration. And Om really is also just the background sound. It's when I sing until a song no longer really has words. The song just is it's just an internal vibration. So this is a great place to end for today. Thank you to Melissa for her participation in class. Any questions you have, Melissa, before we leave for today?
You know, I think the one I have goes back to the first one, the more esoteric one about.
Yeah. So bhava pratyayo videha prakriti layanam.
Mm-hmm.
So how is it that a soul can make a choice when it's not in a body?
Yeah, when it's not in a body. And how does, like, there has to be a first one, right? If it's trying to make its way, there has to be a first time. I don't know. It's like a hard thing for me to wrap my head around.
So I'm by no means a master of the progression of the lives. It is implied, I shouldn't say it's implied. So my very limited understanding of the progression of life and the progression of the soul, the journey of the soul, has my very limited understanding. So it's important to acknowledge, is that a soul is merely like a drop of water in the ocean. And that drop of water is actually the ocean. And yet, with its ego identity, it has this false sense of I-ness, that it's the drop of water. And this drop of water that is actually the ocean, its entire journey is just toward becoming the ocean again. And as that manifests in the long duration of life forms that we see here on the planet Earth, we measure time with the sun here on Earth, or in some cultures also with the moon. But the scale with which we measure time is so teeny tiny and insignificant with what the Vedas, this culture that has given us these teachings of the Yoga Sutras, their concepts of time literally measure these great eras or epochs that we would equate to one cycle of the Big Bang, one expansion and contraction of the Big Bang. And so as the universe itself is going through this, so is all of these little droplets of water that are these seemingly, the wave that crashed to shore and all the little bubbles like splintered apart. And each of these seemingly separate entities is actually taking on all different forms of life which have an increasing sentient quality. And by the time a being is lucky enough to take a human birth, it has the capacity to choose. And with that comes a great possibility for emancipation, and yet also with that comes a great sense of responsibility for those who act out on the most base sense activity can in fact become disconnected or dissociated from the ocean of awareness. Some cultures say infinite for infinity, as in the Christian concept of hell. Others say just for a really long time, having to endure endless sense of suffering, as in you come back to earth perhaps as a less sentient form that has to endure ungodly amounts of being eaten and ripped apart and torn, and all sorts of violations happen to it. And then even in human form has to endure every atrocity that being committed. That's why Gandhi said God created karma and then retired. And that's why in 12-step meetings it's so common to hear people say, don't worry at getting back at that person. It's bad enough just being that person.
Mm.
So, I don't know that I clarified anything, but I did talk for a while. My wife's guru, Dr. Shivananda Murthy, has written books in Telugu and in Sanskrit, none of which I can translate. However, there are a couple books in English, one called The Structure of the Universe, and in that he describes more the different planes of existence. And he's one of the few modern authors to have attempted to describe this kind of thing, which is incredibly esoteric and beyond the belief structure of most people.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a copy of that book, and I believe at the school you can look for it. And if not, I'll see if I can bring it.
Sounds good.